and you're in. We are. I'm looking forward to a great session with you. I always like the evening session because it's smaller. We have about 400 people registered in both the morning and the evening session, but we always get a smaller crowd, and it makes it a little bit more, I'm going to say, intimate afterwards, where we have a good conversation with all of us. So let me share my screen with you, and we're going to get going here. Well, we're going to go on a journey in our time together. For those of you who have sat through and come to my regular webinars or have been through some of my leadership programs, you know that this is intended not to just be a presentation, but it's intended to be a journey. And I'm going to take you on a very personal journey to have us reflect on this whole thing that we call caring. And I'm going to separate it into three components. We're going to be together here for an hour and a half. I want to say right off the bat that I want to, in some way or another, create a community here for this short amount of time that we have together. So we have access to this thing called the chat room. And I would encourage you to get involved with the chat room. Put your comments in. Give us your perspective. You know, you're going to get two voices here, myself, and you're going to be really treated by a good friend of mine, a CEO, and just a very, very dear friend of mine that's going to speak this later in the session. And I'll introduce Trev in a few minutes. But what I want to say is get involved with the chat room. Give us your perspective on things. Help us understand what resources do you have. We're going to be just two voices here among many. So give us your perspective. Ask questions in the chat room. Respond. And I'd like to just start off by just having people put in the chat room where you're from. And we'll just get to know each other just a little bit as you can go through the chat room while I'm presenting here. So I'm going to do three things. First of all, for the first half an hour, it's going to be an hour and a half. I hope you can stay for the whole hour and a half. I'll be, you know, this morning we were on for a lot longer than an hour and a half, actually. A group of people stayed on much later. But we're going to be on for an hour and a half at least. And if you need to go earlier, obviously you need to leave earlier. The recording, it will be recorded. You'll all get a copy of the recording as well as a copy of the slides. And so for the first half an hour, I want to give you a framework around caring. What do we, you know, what's my perspective on caring? Then we're going to hear, you're very, very fortunate to hear from Trev, who's going to give you a caring leadership story and his experience and challenge and journey through the caring journey as a leader. And so you're going to get Trev's perspective for half an hour, and then we're going to open it up for a dialogue and for question and answers. And I distinguish between dialogue and discussion, because a discussion is what we call an intellectual conversation from the head. A dialogue, I'm hoping, would move into the heart, and that we can really open our hearts with each other. I would hate to talk about caring in this session and have us not care about each other and not open our hearts to each other. So at this time of year, particularly with all the demands, I'm really, really appreciative of you just pausing and reflecting about what caring means to you. So let me give you this framework. It's my own caring story. And this is a story about me on the left there and my brother on the right. There were very few pictures of my brother and I being close. I know that we were close when we were first born, and I'm imagining that for the first few years we were close, but this is pre-memory. I actually can't remember very many times growing up that my brother and I were close. We lived rather separate lives right from the get-go, as early as I can remember. We had very loving, caring parents that were very encouraging and invested in our lives, but they also brought their own damage into the relationship. And so we lived with some trauma, a fair bit of trauma actually in our family. My brother's way to respond to that trauma was to close the door and just become we called him in those days geeks. He just became a science major and just closed the door off. I became the caregiver in the family. That was the role that I kind of took. And I engaged in caring, and I'll share with you my own journey through that. And I also attempted to try to be a jock and fit into that crowd, but we lived in two different worlds. And even as adults, we grew up in, you know, this is a very typical picture. We would visit each other a few times a year, but this is very apropos of the kind of relationship that we had. We both were kind of looking in different directions. And it was kind of the relationship that I had with my brother. Now, my brother became a doctor. And this will all come full circles about what I mean by caring. But my brother became a rural doctor here in Alberta, worked in a small town in Sundre, about an hour north of where I live here, just west of Calgary. And for 35 years, he practiced medicine. And in 2013, he was awarded Alberta's Outstanding Family Physician. And this is awarded by his peers, nominated by his peers. He went to Vancouver to receive his award on behalf of other provinces in Canada that each had their own nominations. And he went to receive his award. 3 days before he was to receive his award, he collapsed in the arms of his wife and was taken to the Vancouver General Hospital, where 5 days later, he got the grave diagnosis that he had an anaphylactic astrocytoma, which is basically a brain tumor that he knew would eventually take him down. He lived for 3.5 years after that point. And I was involved in caring for my brother during that time. I didn't do the heavy lifting. He stayed at home. He had a caregiver and his wife that did primarily the heavy lifting. And I came in and subbed the caregivers off. And for 1 day a week, I had a chance to care for my brother. And I bathed him, I shaved him, I massaged his feet, stuff I never thought I would ever do with my brother. And it was a very precious time for me to pause and reflect about my life. And the interesting thing is that one of the things I did was when he was no longer able to walk, I wheelchaired him around his hospital grounds, and his patients would come out and they would hug him and they would cry, and his staff would cry, and his team and his colleagues would just come out and just hug him and cry. He wasn't just admired and he wasn't just respected, he was truly loved. In fact, I didn't know how much he was loved because we were so disconnected. And I really listened. What I asked is, what makes a great doctor? Why was he so loved? And the answer is that what makes a great doctor is what makes a great parent, what makes a great community leader, what makes a great leader in an organization. And what makes a great doctor, according to every one of them who said this, is that he cared. He cared about his family, he cared about his patients, he cared about his work, he cared about his community, he cared. And I've learned that people will cut you a lot of slack if they know that you care. They won't cut you much if they don't know you care, but you can do things a lot imperfectly if people know that you genuinely care about them. And so out of this emerged a book. You know, for those of you who know me, know that I don't write books because I know something. I write books because I want to learn something. And I wanted to learn about caring. It just took me into this whole journey. And the interesting thing is that I wrote this book called Caring is Everything. I took a year after Hal's passing I went into grief counseling. And I explored very deeply the lessons of learning. And what I learned, the lessons that came out of this learning for me, and this journey that I went through. And one of the things that I learned is that I wasn't really grieving Hal's death. What I was grieving is the fact that we never really got close until he was dying. And so his dying really awakened my living. And it was very healing for me to awaken to me what really matters in my life. And this whole journey, if you want to learn something, write a book about it. And this has been my journey. So what I want to offer to you today are three lessons that I've learned about caring. I mean, if we could probably spend all day on this, but I just want to, just for the next 20 minutes, give you a perspective about caring. And I would offer an invitation for you to each send in the chat room or reflect at least what would be the three things you've learned about caring over the years. So here's three things, there's many, but these are three that I want to address tonight about caring and have us all reflect about this journey. Caring requires making space. Caring involves choices, and caring has a ripple effect. So let me go through these one at a time. In my leadership programs, I distinguish between a boss and a leader. And I distinguish between transactional work and transformational work. And in every job, there's always a transactional work and there's a transformational work. In every interaction in life, there's a transactional component that's required. You have to sometimes do the transactional work has to be done. You can't build a culture just on transformational work alone. But it's the difference, the way I compare the difference between a boss and a leader, a transaction versus transformation, the difference between being a father and being dad. Every person here had a father in their life, but not everybody had dad. What was the difference? What was the difference between a father and a dad? If you have a 12-year-old that wants to play on a device, sometimes you have to be the boss, and sometimes you have to lay the law down and say, because I'm the father, I'm going to lay the law down here, and you can't get on that device until you read for half an hour. However, a leader is something very different. A leader is someone who invests in that child's life to the point that they would rather read than get on the device. Now, that's a whole different journey. It's a whole different process. So reflect on what the difference is. And I would suspect that what distinguishes a father from dad is this thing called caring. What distinguishes a mother from mom is this thing called caring and how it's expressed. Okay. So we're not going to go through this list thoroughly. I do this in my leadership development course, but here's what I'm going to offer to you. I'm going to offer a perspective that every interaction has both a transformational and a transactional component to it. And it doesn't mean that we do transactional. I mean, in some ways, transactional actions are over here and transformational actions are over here. But the goal here is to get integrated so that our transactional actions can actually be potentially transformational. And our transformational actions can actually become transactional so that we integrate these together. So let me give you a couple of examples. You're doing emails. Emails are traditionally a very transactional activity. We send information, we coordinate activities, we make decisions, sometimes poorly when we try to do it over an email. But these are transactions. What would happen if we stopped in the midst of doing our email and just send a little note underneath the email, P.S. I really appreciate and value this contribution that you're making to this organization, and here's why. And that you send a transformational note. When you're cooking supper with a loved one, either a child or a significant other in your life, it can be a transactional exercise. We work out the ingredients and we cook it so long, it's a transaction. Or you could actually stop and make space to look into each other's eyes. Or one person can do this. You can look into the other's eyes and realize, you know what? We're not going to be together forever. And express love in that moment where you just make space for love, where you make space. Really what caring means is making room. It's in us to care. Babies, we know this, are born with the innate ability to care. But in our busy lives, we don't tap into that power. And so a big part of caring is just making room in our own life, making space for that caring to come through. I'll tell you, my dad, I learned this from my father. Every couple of weeks, I lived on a small farm in central Alberta. And every couple of weeks, we take the garbage to the dump. Now that's a transaction. We load up the garbage and head to the dump. But my dad would never use the word transformational, but there was an old guy that lived at the dump. His name was Monty. I'll never forget this old dirty guy. He lived on what other people dropped off. I mean, I don't think you can live at the dump anymore. I think there's probably municipal regulations that would prohibit that. But back in those days, this old Monty lived at the dump. He lived in a trailer that someone dropped off. And every time that my dad would go to the dump, he would bring a pot of hot chocolate and sit and have a hot chocolate with Monty and visit with him for an hour or two. It felt like all morning. I don't think it was that long, but my dad really cared. And he made the time. I hated it, but I know today that he was planting seeds in me to take time for people. I just thought it was a bit of a pain that we did this, but he really genuinely cared. And the strange thing is that when my dad and mom sold their farm, Monty got on that old bike that someone had dropped off and rode 10 miles to come to say goodbye to my father. He made an impact in his life. He made an impact in his life. So how are we making an impact? My dad, when we went to the grocery store or we went to the hardware store, my dad would connect. He struggled with mental illness. He was a sensitive guy, and he probably didn't really belong in this world. He didn't feel like he fit in this world, but the way he fit is that he cared. He struggled with depression a great deal in his life, and I've inherited some of the gift of his depression. But he wouldn't be conscious of the people lined up at the teller, at the cashier. You know, he would want to connect. He would want to make that person feel very special. The only thing that was important in his life was living in that moment. And he cared to be invested in that moment. I was embarrassed at the time, and I just wanted to get out of there because he was holding up the whole line. But I didn't realize until much later in life, those seeds of caring that were really being planted in me. Next time you go to the grocery store, this can be a transaction. People are standing, sitting or standing. The cashier standing, the clerk is standing behind the the plexiglass now with the mask on. And you know what? Every cashier has a name tag. You know why they have a name tag? Because they have a name. And if they got a name, they got a story. And what if we just took 30 seconds to just make somebody's day? How much we appreciate them. I learned from my photographer years ago who prepared me for the pandemic. This was years before the pandemic. She's always told me, Dave, don't smile with your mouth, smile with your eyes. Show people that you care through your eyes. And this is what caring is making time, making room, making space. Number of years ago, we've got a few law enforcement people on this call today that I have great respect for. And I can tell you that years ago, I'll never forget this. I was driving downtown in our town here. Police car came up behind me. Constable walked up beside my vehicle and explained that I had just rolled through a stop sign. And I said, well, then thank you for stopping me, and you better give me a ticket. Now, this is a tradition. This is a typical transaction. He takes my license and he takes my registration, writes out a ticket, and I send in the money. It's a transaction. But what this constable did is he said, before I give you this ticket, when he brought his ticket back, I'm going to tell you why. Now, I don't think he learned this in a leadership course. He was real. This is what caring is. It's just stopping and being real with each other. He says, I'm going to tell you why. You see, as soon as you've gone into a why, now you've shifted from a transaction to a transformation. And I said, please. And there was this dead silence for probably 10 seconds. And I looked at him, and this young constable had actually lost his composure. He had tears in his eyes. And he said, I just came from a 4 fatality accident where I had to take 4 dead children out of the backseat of a van because somebody went through a stop sign. And he said, I would not want that to happen to you. Now, I'm going to tell you in 30 seconds, this young man changed my driving habits. I won't tell you I've never rolled through a stop sign since then, but I'll tell you that 9 times out of 10, I will think of that officer when I come up to a stop sign. He changed my life in 30 seconds because he stopped long enough to care enough to be present. He didn't just routinely go through. And there's going to be days that we all get routinely into transaction. And I don't want to make a judgment. We got to get the transaction done. By the way, this is parenting. It's really hard to be a transformational person in your child's life. For those of you who are parents, when you have to get your kids to get their darn homework done, we got to do the transaction. It's got to get done. We got to be the boss sometimes, but we also have to be attentive, because if we get overly transactional, we get tired, and it's not good tired. It's bad tired. It's tiredness that will deplete us, because the transaction, if we're not careful, if we run our lives by the tyranny of the transaction, it'll suck the energy out of ourselves and out of our cultures that we work in. You are going to hear an amazing story in about 10 minutes here when Trev comes on and talks about what it means to be a transformational leader. He doesn't necessarily use those words, because I think it's in the eyes of the beholder when you see someone as transformational. In fact, I don't even think you can call yourself a leader. You have to wait until you're seen as a leader. You can't call yourself a leader. You don't get promoted to being a leader. You have to earn that right through the work of being a transformational person. Now I'm going to talk about making choices. We always have to make choices when it comes to caring. Do I care about me? Do I care about my family? Who do I care about? Where do I make choices? And it's not easy. It's not easy. I'll just give you a little lightness in the conversation with a little comic relief here, I hope. Your husband's suffering from a very severe stress disorder. If you don't do the following, he will surely die. Each morning, fix him a healthy breakfast. Be pleasant at all times. For lunch, make him a nutritious meal. For dinner, prepare an especially nice meal. No chores, no nagging. Oh yes, make love several times a week. Do this for a full year, and he will surely regain his health completely. What did the doctor say? You're going to die. So we always make choices. We always have to make choices. This is life, and it sucks, and it's not always neat, and it's not always tidy, and it's messy at times. what I learned growing up is that I had this tendency to want to caretake, to want to give. And I really did it, not really, I came from a caring perspective, but I did it because of my insecurity, because I didn't feel safe in our family. And so when my parents were raging at each other and there was yelling and screaming, what I found myself doing was getting in the middle of that, looking like caring, but it was actually simply surviving. I was trying to care, and I was trying to care by taking the pain away from other people. By rescuing my parents, it was coming from a caring place, but actually what I was I was just scared to death and very insecure, and I was caring as a way of trying to settle me down and help me feel safe. I didn't know that then. I've since learned that. So I had this pleasing nature, and I'm going to talk to you for a second about the difference between pleasing and caring. But we had chickens on the farm, and if you've ever watched a chick peck its way out of an egg, I think it takes about 24 hours. It's a painful process. And so in my caring nature, I want to help it. I don't want the kids' chicks to suffer. So I took my finger and helped it and broke the egg for the chick. Well, you know what happens when you break an egg for a chick while it's hatching? Unfortunately, it dies. And sometimes caring isn't always caring. Sometimes help isn't always helpful. We need to be very clear about how we're approaching this whole thing. So one of the things that I look at is the difference between pleasing and caring. And I just want to give you a little perspective on this in the short amount of time that we have together for you to reflect on what's the difference. Pleasing is trying versus caring, which is allowing. And again, it's not black or white the way I'm making it, but I just ask you with compassion to look at where you are on that spectrum. It's tired versus energized, resentful versus grateful, depleted versus fulfilled, unappreciated versus connected, empty versus overflow, and validation. Trev and I were talking this morning about, if you've ever let somebody into traffic, somebody that wants to get in and you just slow down and let them in. And that's a caring act. But if you're mad at them because they didn't wave and let you know that they appreciated, chances are that's not real caring. If you have this expectation, well, I'll do this for you, but you better validate me because I'm feeling empty today. So I'm going to let you in so that you validate me. We call that pleasing. Now, the way you know the difference is the outcome. Are you exhausted? Are you resentful? Are you depleted? Are you feeling unappreciated and resentful? These are indicators that you're caring coming from a motive of caring, but you're coming from a pleasing place to fill yourself up rather than coming from overflow. So when I talk about in my leadership programs is that the beliefs drive our action, when our action drive our outcome. And if you want to change the outcomes in your life, you have to go back and examine what your beliefs are. And the beliefs that underlie pleasing are, it's my job to rescue others from their unhappiness in order for me to feel safe. This is called sometimes parenting. And what happens is that we expect our kids to feel happy all the time in order for us to feel okay. And so it validates us as parents when we're coming from a pleasing place. If there's pain around, I have to fix it in order to feel safe. I think it can be a bit of a gender issue that we want to move in and fix things. It can also be a leadership issue when we move into a position of leadership. We want to fix things instead of allowing people to feel their pain. We want to feel safe and we want to feel competent. And sometimes we have to feel competent in order to feel safe. And so what we do is that we tend to move in and try to fix things. And it doesn't usually end well. Self-care is being selfish. The belief around pleasing says, you know what, I don't have time to take care of myself because I got to take care of other people in order to validate me. If I take care of myself, it diminishes my whole sense of worth. My identity is tied up in my role of helping you. And so if I'm not helping you, I don't feel worthwhile. And so when I'm taking care of myself, I'm seeing that as self-centered. And I feel more secure and safe when people I care about are happy. So I'm going to organize you to be happy. And if you're not happy, let's make you happy. And so inadvertently, if someone comes to you in pain, we say, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, you'll be okay. And so it looks like reassurance, but sometimes we just want people to be happy in order for us to feel safe. And what that results in is burnout, exhaustion, resentment. And on the other end, on the recipient's end, it ends up with, we get entitled young people, and we get entitled and we get a sense of anxiety. And I don't think that pleasing parenting or pleasing caring is really what we're after here. But all I'm asking you to do is just take an examination of that. So the belief in what I call authentic caring, which is the foundation of what we call servant leadership, is that pain is a part of life. Unfortunately, we'd like to get rid of it, but when we can accept that pain is a part of life, life's not quite so painful anymore. And we don't need to fix pain. In fact, we can't fix pain. All we can do is simply hold the space, be there, create a space, a safe space for others to grow in. Now, I'm not actually really fond of the word self-care, but I do think if we're going to be in the work of caring, which we all are, you probably wouldn't be here. We all need what I call a resilience plan, a plan that's strengthening us each week so that our caring can come from overflow, not from emptiness. And it's not just nice to have, it's a necessity today that we find a way to overflow us so that caring can come from a place of abundance, not emptiness, so that caring can come from overflow, not emptiness. Caring can come through you, not from you. Caring comes from with boundaries, and your work is to assist in accessing resources, presence, and a dignity of choice. And what the result of this is that you have joy and ease and energy. It actually is uplifting. And then the end result is that you empower people and you help people take personal responsibility. So this is something for you to reflect on. Where are you on that spectrum? I'd love to get your thoughts, and we'll have a bit of a discussion afterwards. And in spite of our best efforts, all of you people who are gardeners on this call know this, caring dark gardeners, that in spite of our best efforts, some plants just don't turn out as we had expected. People have to make their own choices in response to our caring. And caring has a ripple effect. That's the last thing I want to say. And then I'm going to turn the time over to my good friend here. So when we take an action, it ripples. We have an impact. And we need to know that we make a difference. People who take their lives don't know that they make an impact. They don't know that they make a contribution, that they're very valued. And as much as we can assure them of that, sometimes the message just doesn't get through. People may remember what you did or what you said, but they may not remember what you did or what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Now, I want you to watch this little interaction here between this man and a little girl. And I want to ask you, who's the receiver of caring and who's the sender of caring? You see, when caring is in line with the universe, when we tap into this stream of human goodness that expresses itself through caring, there is no line. When we give, we receive. When we receive, we give. And we're both uplifted. We both care. But it ripples, that what we give out will come back to us. This is what I call the law of the echo. Whatever we give out will come back tenfold. Rarely does the person who plants the trees ever get to experience the bounty of their shade. You see, I have to go deep to know that my dad somehow or other will see the fruit of his labor. All of those caring actions where he took me to the dump and he took me to the hardware store and he showed me and he demonstrated how much he cared. He's been gone since 1986. I just have to, in my quiet moments, trust that my dad sees this. But he really does not, consciously doesn't, he doesn't see the trees that he has planted. And I think that's true for most of our caring. And we can't do it to get validated, but what we do is that we plant trees because that's who we are. They say that a star doesn't shine bright because it wants to be a bright star. It shines because it's a star. And that's what stars do, is that they bring their light to the world. That's what their work is. And that's the work of caring. So that's my framework for caring. Now what we're going to do is we have a real treat ahead of us. I'm now going to turn the time over to my good friend, Trev Muir. And he's going to give us this the second component called a caring leadership story. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read his bio. And by the way, if you find the word caring, if you look up the word caring in the dictionary, you will see Trevor's name in there. It's who he is. And you will see here in his story that caring is at the root of great leadership. I'll tell you the greatest blessing of my life is the amazing, incredible leaders that I get a chance to learn from. I don't know who the student is. When a guy like Trevor, and I first met Trevor when he told me his story on my podcast, and then he came to some of my leadership development programs. But when he sat through the programs, I didn't know whether I was the learner or the teacher, because I learned every bit as much from Trevor as I probably ever would have taught him. So I'm just honored, truly honored that he's here today. I'll read you a little bio here. Trevor Muir is the CEO of SurePoint Group, co-owner of Inner Enso Inc., author of Addiction to Poetry, and the founder of Someday to Today initiative. He has lasered focused on building a culture of caring and believes to his core that authenticity and vulnerability are strengths. He knows that people help people best by sharing their experiences. He hopes that all individuals will become comfortable sharing their stories of turning their struggles into their strengths. Trev will inspire you through the power of caring, shining a light on a much needed, compassionate world at this time. So on that note, I am going to turn the time over to Trev. I'm going to turn off my slides because he just speaks from his heart, and it's amazing.
Thanks, David, and hi, everyone. When David read that earlier too, I was definitely blushing a little bit and humbled by the nice words. And I got a chance to meet David about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, and definitely him and I aligned so much, especially when it comes to authenticity and caring. And David is an amazing teacher. He leads by example, and it's an honor to be a part of this with him, and really an honor to see you all. I do believe with my whole heart and soul that vulnerability and authenticity are a strength, and I didn't always believe that, actually. I do know that caring is a competitive advantage as well. I believe it's a competitive advantage in life, and it certainly is a competitive advantage in business. And I'll share the story of SurePoint and some of the things we went through. But to start off, I just want to share a little bit about me and how I got my perspective here on life. So I grew up on a farm in a small community in northern Alberta, and I learned a lot of things there. I learned about hard work. I learned about responsibility and accountability. I certainly learned about being a good neighbor and about being there for your community. And I believe that, that's a lot of what set me up for the foundation that I have for my life today. But something that I didn't learn a lot about was feelings or emotions. It just wasn't something that we talked about in our house. And as I entered the adult world, I had no idea really truly how I didn't know what my feelings were. I didn't know how to identify with them. I certainly didn't know how to process them when I would feel something. What I did know is go to work. I knew working hard, and I spent a lot of my life trying to run away from my feelings. If I felt uncomfortable, I would go and do something, and that actually served me pretty well for a while. I had a seemingly successful life, became a part of a business that turned out to be pretty successful, had a wife and a kid and loving parents. I ended up in my mid-30s in a position where was enviable to a lot of people. And from the outside in, it looked like I had a perfect thing going on, beautiful wife, kid. My goal in life was to buy a new quad and go ride the roller coaster at West Edmonton Mall. And here I was in my 30s, and I surpassed every goal that I'd ever imagined. But the truth was, inside I was dying. I was lonely. I was afraid. I was scared to death of everything. And at a time in my life when I should have been celebrating all the successes and having a great time with my family, I was actually going deeper and deeper into a depression. Of course, I wouldn't say anything to anybody. I was too proud, and to be honest, I didn't know how to. And I thought something was inherently wrong with me. And all those awesome things I had in my life started to unravel. And I'll keep this short here for today, but I ended up in a rented condo in Edmonton on the bathroom floor. My wife and I had separated. the business that I co-founded and was a partner in, I know that there was a lot of chatter about getting rid of me. I was not showing up in the relationships in my life that mattered most in a way that I wanted to. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I woke up on this bathroom floor, and I lived in this place for a few months, 11 weeks. And that was 11 years ago. And I can tell you still today how it smells, the color on the walls. I can tell you everything about that bathroom because I woke up that morning with an almost overwhelming desire to end my life. I had everything that everybody wants, but I just couldn't take the pain anymore. And thankfully I didn't. I got up off the floor and I washed my face, and I ended up doing something, that I had never done before. I reached out for help. And so I got on Google and I shared this earlier. I was so stuck in a place mentally that the first thing that popped up when I was looking for help was a psychiatrist. And I said, I'm definitely not going to a psychiatrist. People will think I'm crazy. Here I am, like unsure of what to do. I want the pain to be over so bad that I'm contemplating in my life, but I won't go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So I found a life coach and got in the next day. And thankfully I wasn't fooling the universe at all. The life coach was a psychiatrist. And yet she introduced me to a fellow that day that changed my life. And I went through a whole bunch of sessions with him. And he was trying to really get me to understand that you can't give what you don't have. And I wanted to show up in all of my relationships. I wanted to be a great father, a great husband. I had a caring heart. I certainly was empathetic. I was kind, but I was not able to show up, and I was not able to give what I wanted to give. And he would say, well, you can't give what you don't have. You can't give money if you don't have money. You can't give love if you don't have love. And so he was really trying to get me to understand this. And he did share an analogy with me one time that really stuck. And it was about a champagne pyramid. And he said, have you ever seen a champagne glass pyramid of champagne glasses? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he said, have you ever seen them fill it from the bottom up? And I said, well, no, of course not. And he said, I want you to visualize that and tell me what you see. So, well, it would be inefficient and messy. And he said, the reason why they fill it from the top and it overflows to the next level and the next level and the next level is because that's the most efficient way. Now you want to fill all of these priorities in your life, your wife, your kid, your parents, all of these things with love, kindness, forgiveness, empathy, all these things, but you're not full of it. You're empty. And that's not a bad thing. Awareness actually turns out, once you're aware, you can't become unaware. As I've said before, I spoke at a conference about some of this as well a few weeks ago. But he helped me to understand that I had to do some work, and that I could become selfishly selfless. I could go and do the work, and I could find a way to love myself. I could find a way to forgive myself, and I could fill myself up with self-love. And then when I had an abundance, and David talks about this a lot, and he did earlier, that's when you have an abundance of something, that's what can overflow. And he said, every person in your life, if you're the top of your pyramid and your wife's the top of hers and your son's the top of his, that is when you have a healthy family, because everybody is filling themselves up, and then there's excess of all of the good stuff to give. So he also said something else to me that changed my life. He was really trying to get this through my head, and I wasn't getting it. And he said to me, one session, I sat down, and he didn't ask me how I was doing. He didn't ask me, how are things? See, I still, to this day, I have a canned response. If you ask me how I'm doing, no matter what's going on in my life, I say I'm doing good. I'm doing well. You ask me, how are things? Things are great, or things are awesome. And it doesn't matter what I'm going through. That's my response. And I know that. It's just that it's an automatic thing. But I sat down, and he said to me, Trevor, how are you feeling? That question caught me off guard. I use it a lot with our team and in my life. He said, how are you feeling? I didn't know how to respond to that. So I said something like this. I said, oh, how am I feeling? Honestly, I am sad all the time. I'm afraid. I'm so full of fear. I'm feeling guilty. I'm felt guilty for feeling guilty, and I am lonely. I am always lonely. I'm lonely when I'm alone. I'm lonely when I'm with friends, and I'm loneliest when I'm with my family. And I do not know what is wrong with me. And I said this, and I immediately regretted it. I wish that I wouldn't have. And I thought, here's this guy that I look up to, this professional. this super smart guy, and he's going to point out that how much I have to be grateful for and how good my life is. And instead, I got this great big guy who looked at me with empathy, and he said, "I get it." He said, if you'd have told me anything else, I wouldn't have believed you. He said, "But that's okay." You see, that man changed my life that day. He gave me permission to go and do some things for me that would be healthy for me, that would be healthy for others. And he also put me on a different path. And so I share this with you because this is how I got my perspective in life. I had to go to a very, very dark place, to a bathroom floor, to change my life. And so the worst day of my life, I believed, was that day, but it turned out to be the very best day of my life. So a few years later, I end up, I'm still with SurePoint. I end up in a position where they offer me the CEO role. And it was at a time we had grown our company from 15 people to almost 400 people. Looked like a success story from the outside, just as my life had before. But on the inside, our culture was disintegrated. We were losing money. And I'm not a business person, I'm a tradesperson. And I ended up taking the role after a few conversations. And we got put into what was called forbearance very soon after I took the role. And I didn't know what that was, but it was bad. And basically, we had to find a bunch of money, which was seemingly impossible, or find a new bank in a relatively short period of time, 4 or 5 months. And so I was freaking out. I mean, I'm in my head and I don't know what to do. I'm trying to figure it out. And I was coming from a place of logic. And I woke up one time in the middle of the night on a Tuesday, a few days after I'd received that letter. And I was like, oh man, I was excited. I've been looking at this all wrong. You see, I had a playbook in my life and I knew what to do. And I actually I ended up calling it the Gift of Forbearance. I was looking for a way to really rally our team, to get our culture back, to really get everybody together and connected on a commonality. And this was the thing. There's no greater thing to rally around than a crisis. So I got into my truck the next day and I went to all of the branches. I went to all of the towns. I went and had coffee with people in their houses. I went to the field. I got in front of over 300 people in a few days. And I basically told them all this same thing. I said, hey, I'm Trev, most of you know me. I am way over my head here. And I'm going to need a lot of help. And then I said, I am really sorry. We had an amazing company. We had an amazing culture and we let it go downhill. It wasn't intentional, but it happened. And I want you to know that although it didn't seem like it, we do care. And we care has become the foundational core value of our company. And I'll tell you a bit about that. We have done some amazing things in this company based off of we care. But at that time, I said, we do care. And I said, I want to be honest with you. We're also in this thing called forbearance, and I don't really know what it is, but it's bad. And basically, if we don't get some things sorted out in the next few months, we're not going to have a company left. And I want you all to know, because it was 2013 and there was lots of work. I wanted them to be able to go and find other jobs while there still were some. And I said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I have decided to stay on till the end. And if you do, if you join me in this, if we come together, I don't know how we're going to get through it, but I know that we can get through it, and we can build this thing, and we can build a better company than we ever had before. And that was a big goal, because we had something amazing at one time, and everybody stayed at the time. And so here we were, busy economy, and these folks had options, and they decided to stay, and we really rallied around that. And that actually became, a foundation. We started to rebuild our company at the end of 2018. We had an opportunity. We had sold the company in 2008 to a private equity group, and in 2018, myself and 15 team members and a private equity group in Alberta, we decided we'd try and buy the company back. So we bought the company back with the intention of turning it into a fully employee-owned company. And so really, really proud of this. And we get the company back, take on some debt, and we end up hitting March of the year of the pandemic. And so all of a sudden, things are scary. And our folks, everybody's petrified. We're looking at our business, revenue's going to drop. I think we did what most companies did. We looked at how are we going to survive this? And we went to the book of business, and it says conserve capital and get rid of cost and do all of this stuff. Well, in our business, our cost is people. And so we spent a week and we made a list of folks that we were going to have to let go, or we thought we were going to have to let go. And on a Friday morning, we finalized it, our VP and CFO and myself, and we were going to start to let people go on the Monday, Tuesday, the next week. And Friday night at about 7:30, I called our CFO and VP, and I said, "Don't let anybody go." I said, "Nobody." I said, "We have a history here. We know what to do. This is not a normal restructuring. This is not a time where, a normal economy. We don't know how long this is going to go for. We don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know if this is going to last 2 weeks or 2 months. We don't know if half the world is going to die. What we do know is people are scared, because they're scared of either the virus, or they're worried about their parents, scared of financial instability. There's a lot of fear, and we're going to be sending people home. They can't go see their parents. They're not supposed to go for beers with their friends. They can't go on dates. The kids can't swipe on Tinder. Nothing is normal. And so we are not going to put people in that position. We say we care, and we have an opportunity to show it like we'll never have before. And we have to see if we can figure out another way. At the very least, we're going to let everybody know that we're going to try our best to keep everybody for as long as we can, and we'll extend the runway. So that was the message. So Monday morning, we go out, do a town hall. We start having conversation with our team and letting them know, we're going to keep everyone for as long as we can. And we don't know how long that is, but we will be honest with you if something changes. So we go out, about a week or two in, we realize it's really noble to keep people on the team, but when you can't pay them, and we couldn't pay everybody. Most of our staff is hourly, and they get paid when they go out to work, and we can bill for their time. And so it's not great to keep them on the team, but then they have no way to pay their bills. And the Canadian Wage Subsidy Program came out. And once we realized that we qualified for it, I went to Cam, our CFO, and I said, "Hey, Cam, what if we guaranteed everybody a paycheck? Like, what if we guaranteed every first year apprentice $2,500 and every journeyman $5,000, and we staggered it $2,500, $3,000, so on up to $5,000?" And he loved the idea, but he said we can't afford it, and even with the subsidy. And I said, "Well, what if we could?" And he said, no, he loved it. So I went to the board and got, full support from them too, but the same comment: you can't afford it. And if you can, then we fully support it. So I went back to our team, and I want to point out that our leaders are young. They're in their 30s. They have families. They got kids and SUV payments and mortgages and different position in their life than I am. But I went back and I said, look, here's the plan. And there's no gun to anyone's head here. If you can't do it, you can't do it. But we could do this. We could pay everybody in the company, give everybody a minimum guarantee, but it's going to take a big sacrifice from all of us. And so I said, I'm willing to take a 50% pay cut for the duration of the time that the wage subsidy is here. And they ended up giving up 30%, and our branch managers gave up about 20, and our managers gave up 15, and the entire company gave up 10% for 7.5 months in a year that was really, really tough. Our whole team sacrificed for each other. And it'll go down as the proudest moment in my career for sure. Nobody had to do it. It was an optional thing. It was the only thing was we all had to do it if it was going to work. And it was a 15-minute conversation. And I did say, we're going to be in a book one day. It's either going to be, this is why you never do what they did, and why you go the way the other books say, or if we could do it, then there was probably an option for other companies to do this as well. And so we can model a different way in business. And I'm happy to say that today, we got through that. We're very healthy. We're seeing a lot of growth, and we rolled out our employee share ownership program 2 weeks ago. And we set that up in a way that was pretty unique as well. We didn't want to exclude anybody from being an owner in SharePoint if they wanted to be. And so we set the minimum in at $100 a month so that any person who wanted to be a part of this could be a part of this. So I haven't always in my life, as I explained, I didn't always know or feel the way that I do now about business, but I do know, or life in general, to be honest with you. And I said last session, and I said this at an event I spoke at with Corliss, it's a short distance from my head to my heart, but it's often a long journey. And at SharePoint, we are spending a lot of time on getting people to open up their hearts. During the pandemic, we did a lot of meetings where we started them with, how are you feeling? And if you want to make people uncomfortable, some type A males, we got some people who'd rather get punched in the face in the parking lot than tell you that they're sad. And we were like, no, we're not moving on until you tell us how you're feeling. And you start to get people to open up their hearts and to say, I'm scared. I've got some things going on in my life. My kid isn't doing well. And with SurePoint, we care has become who we are. It would bring tears to your eyes if I told you some of the things that the team has done to help others, to help each other, to help the community. And so during the pandemic, we saw that, it wasn't just a virus that was contagious, it was kindness that was contagious. Our folks went out in the community and they started doing all these amazing and awesome things, these initiatives that you just couldn't even, like I said, couldn't even explain how much impact it had in our communities. And they did something that really surprised me this year. They started a We Care Days week. So it's a full week in September. They're going to do it every year. And each branch was given a budget and they could go out and spend it, but it had to be random acts of kindness. We had folks go give free coffee cards to people and bring people to tears. We had so much feedback from it. It brought us together as a team. But the kindness, the generosity, and the impact that it had on some human beings was amazing. And this year we sponsored a Feed 500 People, an event with Santa YEG in Edmonton. And I told David about this and shared it earlier as well. We went there. I went there with the idea that we're helping, we're giving, we're going out, we're spreading kindness, we're doing all this stuff. And it's true, we did. I mean, we were going out and doing something good. But when I was walking around on the streets handing out food, I received way more than I would have ever imagined. I called my wife on the way home from that, and I said, I love you so much. And I had a deeper level of gratitude than I've had for a long, long time. And I had more empathy than I've had. And I realized that, that day on the bathroom floor, my life could have changed. And I believe to my core that I'm one bad decision or one tragic event away in my life from being there with them. And if you want to feel gratitude, I recommend go out and look some of those folks in the eye and realize that they're just human beings and no different than I am. And they have the same feelings and emotions as well. So I also wanted to, I never miss an opportunity to talk about this initiative that we kicked off, and David mentioned it. It's called Change Your Someday to Today. And about 6 years ago, I was in Calgary with a friend of mine. He works with us. He's one of our vice presidents, and he's like a brother to me. I love the guy to death. We were there. We were going to go throw a frisbee around one afternoon, be active, and there for 5 minutes, and he starts complaining of a headache. And he's a super healthy guy, big strong lad. A few minutes later, he ends up collapsing in front of me, grabs his head screaming, and then he rolls down this hill and he stops breathing, and he flatlines. And so I chase him down the hill, roll him over, and thank God for 911. I called them. There was nobody around. I call 911 and I get him rolled over and I give him CPR for about three minutes or so. And the first responders get there and they bring him back to life. And thankfully he's super healthy. He's got a little boy and a beautiful wife, and he's got a great life. And just that day was impactful for both of us. It changed our lives again. At the same time, I lost a mentor and a good friend at 62 years old, and he passed away. He had retired in January and he passed away a few months later. And it was just after I experienced that event with Marty in the park. And so, I'm contemplating life at this time, and at the funeral of Brian, my friend Harvey and his brother-in-law said the eulogy, and at the end he talked about all the things that him and Brian were going to do someday. They were going to go golfing at these courses in North America, and he said, we're not going to be able to do that now, and I hope that you all go and change your someday to today. So I ended up writing a poem the next morning, and I shared it internally with SurePoint, and it kind of went viral, and our team does what they do, and they turned it into this challenge: make your someday today. And it was pretty simple. You write, something you're going to do someday that you've always said you're going to do. You put it on a sticky note on a wall. We take a picture of it, and if you do it, you let us know, and we celebrate it. And we do a draw for $200 every month for each of the branches, and then we did a $1,500 random draw at the end of the year so that we could help somebody make their someday to today. And so this thing, it went viral internally. It got us all going. Marty and I, we decided we needed to do something to celebrate life, and so we made our someday to today to go and climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and an amazing experience. If you want to be connected to the universe and feel like there's a higher power out there, go and climb a mountain. And when you get to the top, especially that one, I don't know, there was something extremely spiritual about it. But the team took it, and they've launched it in a bigger way, and they've challenged lots of companies now and lots of individuals to go out and make their someday today. And the communities that we live in, they're doing some amazing things with this. And the reason for that, obviously, is we're not guaranteed another day. And if we can spend more time with those we love, it doesn't have to be climb a mountain or jump out of an airplane. We had people who reconnected with their family members who they hadn't talked to in years over some resentment. We had family members move closer to one another. And David had talked about making space earlier for each other, and how human connection is so important. And I believe it's the greatest gift we can give to one another is that. And I also believe that it doesn't take that much effort. I know that if I'm thinking of somebody and I send them a text, I'm thinking of you, I know how I feel. I also know the response I get back. And when somebody texts me, and I get lots of people now text me in the morning, good morning, Trev. And I'm just overwhelmed by that, a simple 2-second text. And it changes my entire day. And so that inspired me to be, when I'm thinking of somebody that I love, to just say, hey, I'm thinking about you. And so this doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it makes a difference. I do something on Christmas Day. It started out with about 15 people, but I love Christmas. I don't sleep that night. So I started about midnight sending texts. And last year I sent over 450 individual messages to wish people a Merry Christmas, and started off with just the SharePoint folks. And I get a lot of adoration and admiration for that. And people are like, oh, that's awesome. And I say, yeah, but kindness can be self-serving. I send 450 messages, but I get 450 messages back. And now at midnight, I have to have like 5 ready, because people stay out till 12:01 to try and beat me. And I don't even waste my time with New Year's Eve anymore. I used to do it then too. But some of these fellas, they'll send me a text before they kiss their girlfriends to try and beat me with a Happy New Year. And so it's become really, 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 really fun. And it's I know that has people have shared with me that some of the people that I reach out to, I'm their only message on Christmas Day, and I think, holy shit, look at my life. And I feel sorry for myself sometimes. And when I hear things like that, those people make a difference in my life as much or more than I do in theirs. So I think with that, I hope you all have a Merry Christmas. I hope you all take something away from this discussion. I hope you all feel more comfortable, being vulnerable, and hopefully, you leave here with a heart filled with a bit of love and kindness.
Well, Trev, before I'm going to let you go, there's 2 things I would invite you, if you would, to read that poem for us. And then you also have an event to tell us about tomorrow night that I don't want you to forget.
Oh yeah, thank you. I almost forgot it earlier. So yeah, I'll be happy to read the poem. Thanks, David. So the poem is called Someday to Today. Someday I'll climb a mountain. Someday I'll ride a horse. Someday I'll take that lesson, or I'll finish off that course. Someday I'll learn to fly a plane. Someday I'll ride my bike. Someday I'll sleep beneath the stars and go on that long hike. Someday I'll run that marathon. Someday I'll learn to cook. Someday I'm going to lose some weight and read my favorite book. Someday I'm going to work less, and someday I'll take a trip. Someday I'll spend more time with friends, and I'll sail on a ship. Someday I'll show more empathy to everyone I meet. Someday I'll show more kindness to a stranger on the street. Someday I'll volunteer my time, give more to those in need. Someday I'll grow a garden, and I'll hand plant every seed. Someday I'll be more patient with my child and my wife. Someday I'll cherish moments as they happen in my life. Someday I'll act more childlike. Someday I'll laugh much more. Someday I'm going to love like I have never loved before. Someday I'll play more with my kids, spend more time with my wife. Someday I'll find more balance in my very crazy life. Someday I'm going to do the things I've never done before. Someday I'm going to take some risks, walk through an unknown door. Someday I'm going to let all my emotions run awry. Someday I will allow myself to just be sad and cry. Someday I will be happier. I'll feel more inside. Someday I'll watch a full moon as it shifts the ocean's tide. Someday I'm going to worry less and focus less on wealth. Someday I'm going to have more fun and focus more on health. Someday I'll tell my parents what they truly mean to me. Someday I'll be the person that I truly want to be. Someday I'll tell my siblings that I love them very much. Someday I'll hug my family more and treasure every touch. Someday I'll watch the sunrise and I'll watch as the sun sets. Someday I'll forgive others and let go of my regrets. Someday I'll be more present. I'll be more aware each day. Someday I'll gain more faith and I'll take more time to pray. Someday I'll have no somedays left, as someday I will die. So change your somedays to today before they all pass by.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. And for those of you, we have a SharePoint hosted. It's going to become an annual thing. We have a virtual magic show, Magical Christmas with SharePoint tonight at 5. It's free to everybody in the world. Kids love it. It was a huge hit last year. We had 2,800 independent viewers. So we figure there's 4 or 5 people per computer. We've opened up to schools, to the Stollery, to a lot of the children's hospitals, and we want you to share, to attend, share it, and we'd like to break the internet tomorrow night. And Matt Gore is an amazing entertainer, amazing human being, and he's gracious enough to do these things. We hire him, and he's willing to open it up to everyone. So if you can make it at 5 o'clock tomorrow, please do. So.
Well, Trevor, you leave me speechless. Thank you for your gift of presence today, for your authenticity, and for your obvious caring. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the recording. And what I'm going to invite you to do is to, if you are able to turn on your video. And I'd like to just spend the next half an hour having a dialogue. And by the way, a couple of things. I will send you out the link to the video. And with that link, I will send you a link to Trevor's book, that you can get a copy of his book and have that poem. And you'll also get a link to the event tomorrow night. Although you can, Trev, you might want to instruct them more. Actually, you could maybe put that link right now in the chat room.
And let